Connecticut has this law that could have helped in maybe the El Paso case and many others, but a lot of people really don't know about it. Why not?
Well, I'm not sure why not. I mean, it's gotten a lot of attention. I know I sent letters to the people, the presiding officers of the various state legislatures after the Parkland shooting, and that's another example where there were lots of signals in advance that would have told us that this person is really a threat and needs to be looked at and perhaps needs to be subject to an investigation by authorities to determine whether they're appropriate to have firearms. And this is something which only seems to get attention when we have a mass shooting and people talk about, well, gee, I knew that this fellow had problems. I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything, kind of thing.
We see that so often in many of these cases, that these individuals have many weapons, they're unstable. So this really addresses some of the mental health issues, doesn't it? And that seems to be an agreeing point for many people, Republicans and Democrats.
Right. This is situated exactly at the intersection of firearms issues and mental health issues. This piece of legislation in Connecticut, since its enactment, has saved many, many lives of people who probably would have committed suicide because of their mental health condition and their access to firearms. And I have to believe that there are at least same number or a substantial number of people who, because of their mental instability and access to firearms, and this law was used, were prevented from committing murders. And they're not all mass murders. It could be shooting one person, which is not going to get a lot of headlines. But it's something that is much more common than the mass shooting. This is something that is loaded with due process protections. You have to have two, not one, but two police officers have to conduct the investigation and reach the decision that there's probable cause. They have to bring this to a judge, and the judge has to evaluate it in the same way that the judge would evaluate a search warrant for any other purpose. Is there probable cause to believe that those conditions of mental instability and constituting a threat to themselves or other people have been met? And this is a piece of legislation that works 24/7. It doesn't have to wait for a courthouse to open. We have judges available all day, all night, every day, who are ready to sign on these things, and so does every other state, because every state uses search and seizure and arrest warrants, and they do them at midnight sometimes when they have to. And so we have the same kind of due process that we have for everything else. And we can use these procedures and have used them successfully. And the great fear that is sometimes expressed that everybody's going to have a disgruntled former employee or a co-worker or a former boss or a former spouse or someone who's going to go to the police and turn them in and start a whole process, that has not happened. I'm sure there may be a case or two like that, but in the 1,200 times that this has been utilized, it has not been some sort of effort to take guns away from people for no other reason than some sort of vindictiveness. That has not been the case. And that's been protected. We have protected the rights of the individual, and we are protecting society. We are saving lives with this legislation. First and foremost, this really is best done at the state level, and so I'm encouraged by the legislation that was just recently announced by Senator Blumenthal and Senator Graham to try to encourage states to adopt this kind of legislation, because that's where 90% of law enforcement occurs. If you had a federal law just like this, you'd have to find an FBI agent or an ATF agent in order to start the process, and I don't think most people really know where to go to find those people, or a U.S. prosecutor, if we were to copy exactly what Connecticut does, but just use the federal offices in place of the state ones. So I think that there is some movement. I am disappointed that since 1999, so few other states adopted this until the Parkland shootings occurred. And starting with that, there seems to be a really significant movement in the direction of adopting this kind of legislation. And I think the legislation being proposed in Washington to encourage the states to do this by tying federal law enforcement money to adopting this kind of legislation is a good step in the right direction. You can tell, looking at the numbers of suicides and controlling for all the other factors, a scientific researcher can show that we have in fact saved lives, lots of them, with this, of potential suicides. And even if that's all this does, is avert suicides, it's worth it, I think, to do that.